Welcome to the We Wonder podcast. I'm your host, Jason Schlachter, and this is the podcast where we talk about science, technology, and its impact on society. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe to get new episode alerts. We're also on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, you can find us at We Wonder Podcast. You can also shoot us an email at feedback@wewonderpodcast.com. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. Also, feel free to send us topic requests, guest requests, or do you know somebody that should be on the show? Let us know. We look forward to it. And now, let's kick things off. We're going to take a quick break from the show to talk about our sponsors. Anchor is sponsoring my podcast. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. I'm using it for my podcast. It's free, it's online, it has creation and editing tools that you can use from your computer or your phone. In fact, I often record from my phone with other guests. Anchor will distribute your podcast across all the major platforms. You'll be on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Everything's in one place. And if you download the app from the App Store on Android or on Apple, or go to anchor.fm, you can start recording your podcast today. So if you're dreaming of doing that, go out, record one, and send me a link. I'd love to hear it. And now, let's get back to our show. Today, I've got Robert Joseph here as a special guest. He's a director of industrial strategy at a large S&P 500 manufacturing company. And today we're going to explore manufacturing, automation, and all the things that come with it and how it impacts our lives. Robert, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this.
And what is industrial strategy? What does that mean?
It means many things to many people. To me, what it means is that I am part of a bigger group that looks at the factories in our company and tries to either improve efficiency of them or decrease defects or save money and time.
Okay, that's great. And how many factories do we have? How many factories are you doing that? Is it
hundreds? Yeah.
Okay.
We're a global company and we make a lot of stuff. And with that, we are an older company doing manufacturing, and because of that, we have older equipment that we're retrofitting with sensors. We have some also younger equipment that already has PLCs or has devices on it that will tell us how the equipment is doing and do measurements. But again, we have some older devices too that we don't have any insight into how well that equipment is doing. And so we're starting to change our factories over to be more modernized with more data that we can make sense of, as well as also hooking it all up together to look at the bigger picture of how not only is this factory doing, but how are we doing as a whole.
Okay, so industrial strategy is about trying to understand what's happening inside of our factories and trying to automate the activities that are happening inside of our factories.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think when people hear about industrial automation, there's a long history of jobs being shut down and robots coming in and taking over. Is that the focus of this, or is there more nuance to it?
There's always nuance to everything. I know, that was a setup.
I'm setting you up. Sorry.
Yeah, no, don't apologize. I like setups like that because there is a lot of nuance. I mean, ultimately, what our position is, I think, or what our viewpoint as a company is to really make the company money. I mean, that's what companies are established for, to make goods and services that people want to buy, that then supports the company and supports the stockholders and keeps the company moving. The thing I like about our company is that we do that, but we do it with a good citizen's bend, meaning that we don't want to just make money. We also want to help the world be a better place. Now, having said that, part of what this whole automation does is not only makes us more competitive because it allows us to be more consistent with the way that we make things, but it also makes life in some cases easier for people. Now, that might mean that we're able to do things with fewer people, but that also brings about some safety associated with it, and some of the jobs that are repetitive that really cause pain and cause arthritis or whatever it is that it causes, you now have the ability to offset that to some thing that doesn't care about how many times it does something. The other part to that too is that as we continue to grow and we continue to make more things, then the people that are maybe displaced by some repetitive work get retrained in order to do more stuff that is not repetitive, because we have a greater need for people. I've seen a few studies in which the more automation the company added, the more people they needed, because the more sales they had and the more things they needed people to do. So it's not a foregone conclusion that just because you automate one part of the company that you can't take the people there and move them someplace else. And I think that's one of the focuses that we have.
Yeah, and that seems like a classic argument too. If you look historically, right? People who were the Luddites, right? The Luddites were people, I think, in France. Is that right? Who were loom weavers?
This is your story.
Okay.
You brought it up.
Well, maybe I should have done a little more research before bringing this up on the show, but I'm just going to go with it, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but the idea stands.
Yes.
You hear people say they're technology Luddites. They're people who are not into technology. Maybe they're against technology. I believe that term comes from the Luddites, who were like, I think, against automated loom weavers. I think these were actually a trade union or trade organization in Europe that was against the automation of weaving, because it was basically going to destroy their careers, and so they would, I think, even sometimes sabotage these like terrorist activities. And if I'm completely wrong on that, then just take it as an interesting story.
You can write in if you tell them correct the story.
Yeah. I think that's what Luddites were, and it's kind of the same argument in some sense that, those people who were manually weaving lost their jobs, and that was terrible. But look at the clothing we have, look at the textiles that we have. I mean, I think as a society we want to move forward with this kind of stuff. I would assume that we can make similar arguments today, that we need to consume more. No, I'm just kidding. But that it's net positive to society as we go forward.
Yeah. And so if you take that idea and grow it out a little bit more, I think that the way that society is run is going to have to change. Because if we really do automate things enough, then we start to look at goods and services being relatively free to create. And so now if we have a wealth of resources, then what does money mean? And what does it mean to, I want this and I got to pay for it because it's free to get. So now you actually have a society in which people actually get to do what they want to do and create what they want to create and have what they want to have. And nobody's going to want the same thing. I mean, like, you might want a Rolls Royce and I might want a Ferrari or something like that. So it really is a time, I think, in our society in which we are changing the underpinnings of how we think about things and how we do things.
Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I actually think, if you take that a step further, I've said for a few years that I think energy is going to be approaching on free.
Yeah.
Right now, energy is expensive because we burn non-renewable resources, right? And it costs money. But as solar scales, as wind scales, and as these fixed assets, are basically paid for, there's very likely to be just an abundance of energy for assets that have been fully paid for, and they'll be paying you to get energy off the grid. And I think compute's the same way. I think compute is moving towards free. It's already free in many different ways. So when energy is free and compute is free and manufacturing is automated, to your point, like, I don't know, I used to take everything I could get that was free. and my house is full of stuff now that I'm trying to give away, right? And it's
free
like
for somebody else.
yeah. It's like here's a free, I don't know, like just everything that was
Yeah.
free. It was like, oh, I need that.
Yeah.
Like it's like turns on that reward system in your brain. It's like, I'm not interested in saving money, but if it's free, I need it.
Yes.
And so
that frisbee at the convention,
the frisbee, the hat, the lanyard,
yeah,
you know, the free tire rotations, yeah. And so now I've gotten to the point where I realize my time is more valuable than free, and quality and a good experience is more valuable than free. I actually was like thinking recently that I need to get my tires rotated, and there's a service place near my house that offered to do it for free because they want to find other things wrong with my car, right?
Yeah. We rotated your tire, but you had a flat, and so you need to replace 4 of the tires.
Your engine's blown, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it's a Tesla, it doesn't have an engine. Yeah. Well,
oh, you just had to throw that out there, right? A little salty there. I've got the most modern car around.
Yeah. No, I do worry that they mess up my car, but so I found myself like man, I really want the free tire rotation, but I think I'm gonna go pay somebody to do it, just so that they don't offer me all this free stuff that I don't like, you know, all this I don't want. And so anyway, I think if we're in this society where everything is free, it does do what you said. I think it forces us to reevaluate what we want and what we value, in a way that we're just not used to. We've never, it's never happened, right?
Yeah. Brave New World.
Yeah. Or 1984 would be like the second edition called 2019.
There we go. That's a good book for a good title for a book. We should write that.
The 2019.
Yeah.
I feel like you can just re-release 1984. just relabel it. You know how they sometimes relabel books over time to like be like appropriate for that generation.
Yeah.
But so I hear a little bit of universal basic income potentially coming into the conversation. I don't know if that's where you meant to go with it, but I think
no, not really. But
if
let's just go for the ride.
Yeah, this is
a beautiful journey.
You know, Robert's here because he's smart and insightful, not only because he knows about industrial strategy. So we're gonna get all aspects of your insight here. I think like when things are automated and when things are free and in abundance, there is sort of that question of, and you said even like money doesn't have the same value, right? There's sort of this question of what do we do? And so for those that you guys that don't know, universal basic income is this idea that everybody gets some income that they live off of, because there won't be enough jobs to go around, and we don't want to have civil war. We don't want to have, you know, the French Revolution kind of thing happening over again. So how do we keep everybody happy, engaged, not rioting in the streets, and also at the same time benefiting from the automation of production, right? And when a select few capitalists or nations own all the capital, literally the money, and also the physical capital of production, you know.
You mean like now?
Like now. Like, yeah, I mean, it's starting, right? It's starting.
No, it's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
That 1% owning 90% of the resources, or something like that.
I still like what Colbert said when Colbert was like, remember when he launched his campaign for president back like 8 years ago? Stephen Colbert from the Colbert Show, he launched, you know, a serious but fake campaign for president, and he got up there and he was like stumping, and he was just like, if you make me president, like I will make sure that all Americans are in the top 1%. Like there's no need anymore for Americans to be less than the top 1%. And it was just such a great speech because it was just impossible, right?
Right.
Anyway, what do you think about universal basic income?
So,
and does it relate to some of this?
It kind of relates to it in the tying it in with it's not just AI. I mean, technology is increasing at an exponential rate. I mean, we're seeing things in medicine that are amazing. We're seeing things in, of course, manufacturing, because that's the field I'm in, and I've seen a lot of stuff going on. But we also are seeing things outside of that, just in general assistance with Alexa and Siri and some of the stuff that's going on in Google and all of those type of things. So we're moving to a point in which technology is going to be universal, and it's going to be relatively inexpensive. So, you know, sort of the universal salary or universal whatever, I think will soon be obsolete, because it's just like, hey, here's the store, come in, get what you want, and leave. And so there's no reason to actually have money. I think where we run into problems is when you start to get people's ego and people's sort of self-worth tied up into what they have acquired or what they're able to acquire, and having to be on top of somebody else and all those type of things is where we will run into problems. But right now we have enough food to feed the world twice over or something like that, I heard. But it's the distribution that's a problem, and there are a lot of things that are being put in place to take care of distribution, everything from drones to driverless cars to driverless planes and all of those type of things. So at some point, I think we'll see a place in which everything's accessible to everybody, and then it's like, well, what good does money do regardless?
Wow.
So
that's fascinating, because you're beyond, like, I think most people, including even technologists, are just kind of getting to the point where they understand universal basic income and see that it's maybe a place we need to go to. But what's amazing about what you just said is you're already generation after next, like that also has a shelf life, and that's fascinating.
And I don't think it's that far off, because at least from what I can see, Moore's law and all of the laws that they're talking about in terms of the exponential growth, I think that we're at that bend in the curve of technology where it's going to continue to increase at such an exponential rate that what used to take a generation will be done in a fraction of that. And I think that it's a great time to be alive by some respects. There's also the other respect, is that because of all this increase in technology, it's making it hard for people to cope, because never in the world have people had so much new stuff thrown at them in a way that is hard to comprehend. And so I see a lot of people struggling with that and trying to figure out, where do they fit into all of that? Are they able to learn all of it? Is this something that is going to make me obsolete and not have a job and not be able to take care of my family? Can I learn all this new stuff that's being thrown at me in a time frame that allows me to do something with it? All of those questions I see people asking themselves and getting, afraid and frustrated by it.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things.
Yeah, and even you and I at sort of the forefront of this change, people might assume that we are able to keep up with all of this as we are leading the charge in our roles, and even for me, I find I can't keep up with everything. When I studied AI in school, it was entirely different than it is now, and I can't keep up with everything that's happening in the field, and I find myself having to choose, narrow swaths of it that I need to dig deep on, and then the rest of it is just experience and sort of heuristics and being able to learn quickly as things change, and I need to know about it. So if you guys are out there listening and thinking like, I don't think I could ever be that advanced on the tech or keep pace with change the way these guys do, we're not really any better off.
I'll speak for yourself. And the reason I say speak for yourself is because what you just said means that you have made an assumption that that's where you need to be, is to keep up with stuff.
Yeah. And
that's the assumption that a lot of people make, and I think it's an erroneous assumption. The reason I say that is because when I was a university professor for over 10 years and have done a lot of stuff in education and learning. And when I look at education and learning, I look at what do we really need to know going forward in this digital age. And I see several things. The first is that our educational system is broken. The educational system is based on the industrial age, where you're taking students through a process very similar to an assembly line based on their age. So everybody learns first grade material, and then they move to second grade and learn second grade material. And
Yeah.
so if you look at a TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson, he talks about the industrial educational system that this was based on.
Yeah.
And so I think that what we need nowadays is a whole different paradigm. And it's not a paradigm of knowing everything, or not a paradigm of being proficient at every skill, but a paradigm at being proficient at learning and learning how to learn how to learn. And what I mean by that is that in teaching, there are several things that I see that are impediments to education. The first thing is the biggest impediment to people learning is emotion. It is the fear, the frustration, the self-doubt that happens when people are faced with something they don't know. And the really interesting thing about that is that those are choices that people make. You actually can choose how you feel about something. And by making a different choice, by instead of being fearful of something, being excited about it, you can actually transform the way that you think about it and transform how quickly you learn about it. Because when you start to fear something, then the cognitive part of your brain shuts down. You couple that along with the conversations that people have with themselves. I taught math for a number of years, and I've had a number of students come to me and say, well, I'm not very good at math. And I'd look at them and first say, well, that's probably not something you just want to blurt out to your professor.
To your math teacher.
Yeah, when you first meet them.
Here's the tissue.
Yeah. But then I would say, well, that's not true. And I'd say, well, what's 1 + 1? And they'd say, oh, that's 2. That's easy math. And I said, well, no, that's not. At some point in your life, that was hard, and now it's easy. So it's not a matter of it being hard or easy. It's a matter of you knowing it or not knowing it and knowing it. So our job is to take what you don't know and turn it in what you know, not that there's any hard or easy measurement of it. That's all self-induced and self-imposed. So instead of saying that I'm not very good at math, why not say I'm getting better at math? Because then you take the ownership of the learning instead of letting math take the ownership of your not learning. So once we go through that process, that is the perspective I think that people need in order to really be effective. And that relieves a lot of tension, because now you're not the person that has to know everything. You just have to be able to learn. And then you couple that with a specific way of not just learning. A lot of people want to learn a skill set or learn a particular thing, but you couple that with, no, don't learn that particular thing, but learn meta-knowledge, learn more about how that thing works, where that thing fits into your worldly view, and how does all this stuff fit together. Because learning is more of a holistic thing than very much siloed. Education has put things in silos, and that's not the way the world works. You know, Leonardo da Vinci, when he wanted to learn how to paint, he didn't just look at colors and stuff like that. He started doing autopsies on people to understand muscle and how muscles work. He started working with aqueducts to understand how water works. He looked at all of that as part of this holistic process of, I want to create the most realistic image that I could.
Yeah.
So I know I rambled on a lot,
No,
but I'm really passionate about people being able to live a life that's powerful for them, and that is not a whole lot of fear and frustration and self-doubt, because there's no reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is really powerful. I'm glad that you got that out there, because I mean, it's pretty amazing as a parent with kids going into the school system.
Yeah.
I wish that the school system was as you're describing it, you know, especially for my kids, which are super creative but don't have a great attention span. I mean, it's exactly what I would want for them. The problem solving, the experience based stuff. I know there's some opportunities to do that through charter schools and specific programs, but I mean, how can we as a society get there, and are we already getting there in some ways?
I don't think we're getting there. And the first thing I want to say is that your kids have a great attention span. It's what you give them that determines their sort of attention span, because and that's the thing. And
that's fair.
Sir Ken Robinson talks about it. He says, look, you put these kids that have been exposed to a very high interactive, they've got everything from all of these things that are keeping them engaged, and then you put them in a setting where it's like, oh no, calm down. You can't be engaged as much as you've been your whole life.
Be quiet and do the worksheet.
Yeah. So it's not that it's and so the reason I say that is because that is the philosophy that's being propagated.
Yeah.
And people are just sort of not buying into it, but they're repeating it as if it is so. And so part of the change that needs to happen is actually a perspective change in people changing the language about how they talk about things, people changing their perspective on how they view things, and people starting to understand that it's no longer about being proficient at a skill set. That is secondary. What you really want to do is be proficient at learning. Yeah. Now, how do we institute change? I think that instituting change on a school level is a battle that needs to be fought from multiple directions, and I don't see that being done effectively. A lot of people say, the school system's broken, and they're trying to fix small parts of it. And I, at one point, worked with a school system in Alaska and built a whole student management system for them, because they didn't have a system that allowed them to really look at what the students knew and to educate them on that. Because what they were doing is, a student could be at level 8 in math and level 2 in English, and that would be fine in their school system because they would teach to the student with what they knew. But that's not how report cards and those things work. And they went from being very poor at standardized tests and things like that to their students really starting to show a lot of promise. Well, then a new superintendent, the problem that they had is that there's a lot of friction. Even that school district, when people went outside the school district to either go to college or to transfer to someplace else, then the other places didn't know how to deal with it. And so there was a lot of pressure to go back to the old way. And so I think that it's going to take a holistic approach of government, of private sectors, of everybody working in the same direction to make a change.
So I appreciate your correction too about the motivation comment, because I think you're actually it's completely correct what you said. My oldest son can sit for hours or days and do a single task that I'm just like, how can you do that, right? Do you want to breathe or eat or go to the bathroom?
He's like, no.
No, I'm building a Rube Goldberg machine and I can't leave until it's fully functional. It takes me a week. That's what I got to do. This is my destiny, right? So there's intense attention that can last for very long. But to your point, and I think this is what I really was thinking that I didn't say, is that he has incredible attention when he's incredibly engaged, and the short attention span is a function of being disinterested, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the challenge. So I would personally love to see what you're describing in place. Looping back up to the automation of jobs and the changing of our societies, it sounds like that's going to be something that is going to be needed as we transition into this space where there's more automation, technology is changing more quickly. I hope that pressure gets put on the education system in a way that it doesn't just completely break. Like, I hope we can have that pressure in a way that changes it. I don't know. I went to give a talk on AI to my son's kindergarten class last year. Mm-hmm. I mentioned this in, I think, my first podcast, and I wanted to give them career advice. And I was just like,
hey, that's where it starts.
Yeah. And we hadn't talked yet about this specifically, and otherwise I would have been like, don't do the worksheets. No. But I was like, what do I tell these kids? And I think what I tried to tell them, probably not super effectively, was, hey, study things that's going to allow you to be dynamic and to handle change and to think critically. I think I told them study math and science and think about, how you reason through different scenarios. But yeah, it was like these kids are going to graduate in 15 years, and a lot of the jobs that they think exist today, a lot of the jobs that their parents are doing, may be gone, right? And it's
Right.
like, I wanted to give them the right advice, and I think that ties into what you were saying as well. They're in the system, and that has to change as well. But yeah, I didn't give the teachers any advice, just the kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're not going to solve all this in one podcast. So.
Yeah, that's true.
But having the conversation, I think, is important because it starts to frame the consciousness of what education is about.
Yeah.
And starts to have people start to question, really, is that the thing that we should be teaching? Are those the concepts that really are where the juice is?
Yeah.
Is this preparing them for this new technology age? And
Right.
that's where I think we can continue that conversation and start to affect change.
Yeah. So similarly to how you were kind of one step ahead of UBI, I think you're also sort of one step ahead of STEM, in that, like, a lot of schools are trying to bring in STEM, which is, I think, very important, and it's a great thing to do, but it also is still adding math and science and engineering to the existing paradigm. I like how you're also, again, going beyond sort of what we're currently moving to into the next paradigm. So shifting gears for a moment, there's something I wanted to bring up which I think is really fascinating. So McKinsey, consulting company, they advise companies like yours on what steps we should be taking.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the best investment? Where should you be investing engineering time and changes? And so they've got all these kind of studies that show return on investment. And one of the studies, which I have in front of me, you guys can't see it, talks about what areas of our society will be most impacted by automation. And a large part of that is going to be industrial automation, manufacturing automation. And they make a distinction between predictable versus non-predictable tasks, whereas the predictable task will be automated first, and the unpredictable tasks will take longer to be automated. And they also make a distinction between physical and non-physical. So tasks that are physical in nature, like screwing something into a part or serving somebody a dish, will be automated before non-physical tasks like managing or instructing somebody to do something. And so within that, what I think is really fascinating is they make a distinction between automating away activities versus jobs. So they make the claim that it's not that we're going to automate away jobs, we're going to automate away activities.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those jobs will consist wholly of activities that have been automated away, right? So for some relatively narrow swath of jobs, they'll just fully disappear. But I think for most people and for most jobs, activities will be automated away rather than the absolute job itself. I know. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you were saying I know, and I was just thinking.
No, I know I've seen this in practice in some instances. Like I've seen in some factories where there's CNC machines that mill parts automatically. So you got a robotic arm that's carving away pieces of metal, and there's a human operator that needs to program these machines for each part, open the door, put in the raw material, and when the machine is done, take it out and inspect it for quality. And I've seen factories where they put robots now in place, and they grab the part, open the door, put the part in, program the machine. When the machine is done, they take the part out, and then they inspect it with a camera and then put it into a bin. And that person who was previously at the machine is now standing in the middle of like 4 machines with 4 robot arms, and he's still watching. He's still there, but the tedium of pulling the parts in and out is gone. He's now making sure that the robot arms are performing. He's making sure that the supply of materials that the robot arm is putting in is fully stocked always, making sure that as they pull parts out and verify quality, that they're being placed in the right bins and being taken away. So that guy still has a job that maybe the 3 other people that he worked with are gone, but in some sense his job has transformed and it's still there, but it's like certain activities were automated away. So I was just kind of curious, what you think about that, and how it relates to the kind of work that you're doing here.
So I think that there is a set of steps that happen. So the first step is let's automate away some of the processes, and it surprises me how much stuff we do that's automated. I mean, there are a lot of human beings that are moving stuff from one place to another, whether it's in a factory, whether it's in McDonald's,
Yeah.
whether it's in, I mean, there's just a lot of manual stuff that people do.
Right.
Whether it's driving a truck or driving a car.
Well, and according to this chart too, I mean, if I look at what is predictable and physical, going to your point, it's accommodation and food services, manufacturing, agricultural, transportation and warehousing. Those are the big ones. So it's exactly what you're describing. These are the areas that are expected to be automated first.
And the way I see it is that, you're not going to. One of the things that I've seen is progress happens in waves. So the first is to go from 4 people to 1. The next is to go from, then you group all those people.
Yeah.
Now you have a factory of 100 people where you had a factory of 400 people.
Yeah.
And then, so now let's see how we can take those 100 people to 25, those 25 to 12, and on down like that. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, because it is part of, I think, the way society is changing. Now, I think with that going on, there are going to be, as with most things that there's change associated with, there's the good parts and people that can take advantage of that, and then there are bad parts that people get kind of left behind or kind of affected in a negative way.
Yeah.
And that's with any change that happens. Blacksmiths were affected when the Model T was, developed, and things like that. So there is a need for people to really think about themselves and how they see themselves in the future. But the other part to that is that I don't know that I would agree, and I'm not trying to go against McKinsey
well, please
report.
Please do.
But,
I mean,
but I think that
like fun.
You've got a lot of people working on a lot of different perspectives on how to use AI, and so you've got we've got Google with its assistant. And that's not a physical job. That's making decisions. You've got Go championships being won, and you've got chess championships being won. You've got now music that's being created by computers.
Yeah.
You've got artwork that's selling at I forgot what it was. The big art Christie's. I think they sold a painting for a few $100,000.
And I just listened to Yacht, which is a group that I hadn't listened to before, and their whole album that they just released is generated by machine learning, and they apparently spent a huge amount of effort pushing their entire back catalog, like hand labeling their entire back catalog, pushing it into an AI system, which auto-generated new compositions, but then they hand assembled those compositions.
Interesting.
So it was like hybrid human AI, and it sounds really good.
I'll have to check it out. But so I that's why I'm pushing back on it, because I see that you have the world that has so many varied interests and so many different perspectives, and then you have technology now that's accessible to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole open source movement, along with computing power coming, going up, and memory prices going down.
Yeah.
It's now making it affordable for a whole set of people that have great ideas to actually implement those ideas in ways that other people hadn't thought about. So I think that if you look at from a corporate perspective, corporations might be going down that path, but you got a lot of personal or individuals that are going down more the decision path, because those are the things they're dealing with. So I think that there's a push on all of those vectors in order to make something happen in just a number of different areas. And then if you look at this other thing is that, we've been talking more about manufacturing and industrial, but if you look at what's going on in healthcare and some of the amazing stuff there, from everything to, the whole mapping out DNA and the whole sort of exponential growth in the ability that we have for a number of new medical sort of kinds of technology. It's it's going to be a very interesting next few years.
It's not just going to be a society that changes, or our technology. It's going to be fundamentally us in the biological sense too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're approaching on a world where there's no money,
and everybody lives forever.
Everybody lives forever. You got everything you need.
Yep.
And we have to find meaning in our lives.
Sounds like Star Trek to me.
But education will still suck.
No. Education will be fun.
Yeah. No,
let's make education fun.
Education will be amazing.
Yeah.
I was only being sarcastic as a commentary on the challenges in changing our ways, but absolutely, education would be amazing as well. So one thing I wanted to ask before we go is we talked a little bit about AI here and there, but we didn't really focus on it specifically. Automation in factories has been happening for a long time, for decades, right? Mm-hmm. But AI has really become front and center in the last 5-10 years, and even in the last 1 or 2 years, it's continued to rise meteorically. How does that change, the AI specifically, affect industrial strategy, and maybe some specific examples of what we're doing, where it's not just the automation that's been around for the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years, but it's something different, like qualitatively different than what maybe some people are thinking about when they think about automation and what you do.
Yeah. So I think that one of the big differences is that you now have the ability to affect a lot more stuff. Automation in the past is, okay, let's rearrange how we do things. Let's have people, work in a more consistent or a better way. Let's look at what they're doing and improve on that. But now we have the ability, in what I think we're moving towards, to have a few people make some massive changes in the automation of our factories. Because if you have robots doing the task and you have sensors doing the task, then all of a sudden, if you have 8 factories doing that and you find an efficiency in one of the factories, you can replicate that very quickly in the other factories. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it were people doing it, then that's a much slower process. So
taking like lessons learned in one factory, and then immediately being able to extend it out, without having to sort of put together a staff and have people go to that factory and start doing things differently.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the difference between dial-up, for those of you who remember dial-up, and broadband. It's like, well, I can wait forever for this page to come up, and I've got to be very careful on which pages I select to look at.
Yeah.
Or I can kind of explore this world and do what I want on these different websites, and I have so much information at my fingertips that I can get to very quickly. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the rate at which you can transfer learnings across factories.
Yeah.
What about handling tasks that involve more perception and more thinking? Is that part of it as well, or is that still not quite yet there?
I think that the part that plays is that we will also see the ability to add additional functionality to what we're able to do to increase at an exponential rate. So before, we went from carriage and buggy to automobiles, and there was a big time span in between that and the adoption of that. But now I think you're seeing that, what you have in the factory today, a week from now could be vastly different and get significant improvement and can be put in place very quickly and easily. And I think we're moving towards that.
Okay. So we're almost up on time. I have one last question for you.
Sure thing.
So, Director of Industrial Strategy, really amazing role today. A lot of fun. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Or where would this role be, I should say, in 10 years? Doing the same thing, or Something completely different?
No, on the beach, just pushing a button saying, okay, factory, do your thing. And then I'll have a little AI assistant say, well, what do you think of this? And I was like, well, AI assistant, why don't you come up with a solution for it? This is the framing of the problem. Here's what we're trying to solve. Here's all the pieces to deal with. Go ahead and put the solution together.
So AI, build your industrial strategy.
Yes.
Go execute on it. I'll just kind of watch from my lounge chair and
direct. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That's the director's role anyways, right?
That's what they tell me.
Okay. Well, Robert, thank you for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun talking to you about these issues. I really appreciate your perspective on the stuff that you're focused on with your role, but also education and society and everything being free in the future. It's a great talk. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to many more of your podcasts. I got to listen to the first one and liked it, and so keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.